All right, thank you, everyone. I'm really glad to be here today. It's going to be an exciting day. Maria, you want to hit the first slide? The first slide's irrelevant. It's just kind of like about me. But I think thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Ari. That was really nice. But yeah, I've been doing FIRST for a long time as a mentor. I actually did it as a student way back in the day. How's the sound, everyone? Is that okay? Because it sounds weird to me here. But what about you in the back? Oh, that's one way of fixing it. FIRST has kind of been a journey for me from participating on a student way back in 1998, if you can believe that. And I've kind of seen how the program's grown and how the program's evolved. But what's been really cool is I've seen how the students have come along in the time, from my generation of students to the generation from 10 years ago to the students that are there right now. So it's really interesting. So let's hit the next slide. I've been coming to SWATposium. I went to the very first one way back in 2006, so we're talking a long time ago. And I've given talks on strategic design, running a team, the Chairman's Award. And there's a lot of robot stuff we could talk about today. We could talk about how in 2020 there's not going to be a bag day anymore. We could talk about the advent of brushless motors to FRC, which was just announced 2 days ago. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on. But I'm going to leave the hardcore robot talk just for a bit. And I think we're going to focus more on how FIRST interacts with the rest of your life. Because there's a lot going on in this program that I think a lot of people don't kind of see the subtle things behind it. And I think it's really important to pay attention to. You hear it a lot when people are like, it's not about the robot. And I want to explore that wording, it's not about the robot. Because I'm one of the more vocal opponents to that wording, because I do think it is about the robot. It's a robotics competition. Like, the robot is key here. But the important lessons that you're learning aren't the ones about what's a gear ratio, how to use a rivet gun. Like, realistically, most people in this program are never going to use a rivet gun once they're out of this program. And that's okay. Like, you're not riveting together your IKEA furniture. Like, it's not a thing. So our world right now is a mess. And it's been a mess before, and it'll probably still be a mess for a while. But the way you solve that mess is you need problem solvers. And that's what FIRST at its core is about. It's about solving problems. And all of you have one problem to solve when the season starts. And it's about the robot. How do we build a winning robot? And whether you build a winning robot or not, that's actually irrelevant. I mean, it's relevant because it's the goal. And we're going to talk a lot about goal setting and what it means to strive for something and what happens when you strive for excellence. But what's really important is what you learn along the way of trying to solve that problem of how to build a winning robot. Because that's where you figure everything out. And that's the most useful skill that you can pull out of this program. By trying to win, you learn how to figure everything out. There's a reason that kids who do FIRST robotics are so successful in the real world. And it's nothing to do with gear ratios or rivet guns. It's because they've learned how to solve problems and they've learned how to win. And we'll hit a lot of that. But I want to talk about this first quote that's up there on the board right now. Enthusiasm is one of the most powerful engines of success. Do a thing, do it with all your might. Put your whole soul into it. Stamp it with your own personality. Be active, be energetic, be enthusiastic and faithful, and you will accomplish your object. Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. So this is going to be pretty embarrassing. I've been reading this quote out for presentations for like the last 10 years. And the quote, pretty much everywhere you go on the internet, is actually attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson. Turns out no one can actually find proof that Emerson actually said this quote. It's just been like one of those internet urban legends that's been spread for years after years after years. Regardless, it's a good quote, so we'll just stick with it. I should probably change the tag there to anonymous, but what does this quote mean? You need to follow your passions. Like, when you think about what's going on out there and what you're doing with your life, it is just so much easier to be successful at something if you're enthusiastic about it, if you're passionate about it. And so that's one of the first lessons I want to get into, because we got a room full of high school students here, and I remember it being at that point in my life, and we got college kids here too who are going through the same sort of thing, where it's like, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? People ask you that question all the time, and it is really hard to answer that. Heck, I'm like an old dude now, and I still don't know what I want to do. And That's okay. But in our lives, there's a lot of people who tell us what they think we should be doing, especially when you're a teenager. There's, it's almost like there's a path that's been set out for you that you didn't define, but you get typecast, you know, and it's like, oh, you know, you're good at math and science, you should be an engineer. And you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, you know, that's just kind of what it is. Oh, you know, my mom was an engineer. I guess I will be an engineer too. But it's like, that's not how we should be making decisions. And you need to kind of follow your passions. And it's one thing to be like, if you follow your passions, you'll be more fulfilled and you'll have more enjoyment. That's all true. But if you follow your passions, you'll be more successful. And that's something we can measure and we can talk about right now. Um, I know when I was at Waterloo, you know, you have 800 math majors, and everyone wants to go into computer science back then. And still probably similar now. And oh, like back at the time, it was like, oh, if you do CS at Waterloo, you can go work for RIM. You can work on Blackberries. Well, see where that got you. But now, you know, everyone sees the jobs at Google, Facebook, Uber, all these crazy startups. It's like, oh yeah, I want to do computer science. But so who's going to get those jobs when it comes to the application phase? So say you have two people. One who is taking computer science because they see the money and they see it's like, oh wow, there's huge money in that. I'm going to do that. I'm good at math. You know, I'm good at programming. I got good marks on this stuff in high school. I got like high 90s. I should be good at this. And then you have the student who just loves to program. And so, you know, classes are starting or whatever, and then, you know, you go to your computer science class, you sit through your lecture, and it's fine. It's like, hey, it's great. You probably do well in the tests. But the student who loves to program after class doesn't leave. They go up, they talk to the professor, they go to learn more. When you have the labs, I'm out of the lab at 2:30. They stay late and they stay there. Any of you who've been around the campus of the University of Waterloo, the labs, people are programming 24 hours a day. It is weird. Like they don't shower, they don't bathe. It is like the strangest phenomenon. But they, see, head is nodding right there. It's like, yep, I know that. I know those smelly people, yep. But like the truth is, they love it. That's their passion. And so when they go into the interview for their co-op job, and they're like, the interviewer is going to be asking a bunch of questions, who's going to be more prepared? The one who was doing programming for 9 hours a week because of their 3 programming classes, or the one who was doing it for 40 hours a week? That's where passion comes into play. Okay, so say it doesn't matter. You know, you've got your degree and you did well, you had good grades. So it's like, we're not saying that you're not good at this stuff, but you're not passionate about it, but you go take a job. You go work in industry. And you go to work at, you know, one of these big fancy companies, let's say Facebook, for example. And you get there and it's like, it's so cool. They have pool tables, they have a fridge with drinks, they have cots, they have places where you can nap. I'm going to warn all of you. If you're working for a company that has places for you to nap, that's dangerous. You'll see in a second. So you don't really love programming, but this is a good job. They're paying you 6 figures right out of school. You want to do this. And you get there and you work your 9 to 5. You work your 9 to 5. But the people who are passionate, they don't care about the 9 to 5. They like staying at work. They'll take advantage of those cots. They'll take their naps. They'll work extra. They'll learn on their own. They'll develop more skills. So when it comes after a year of being there, who's going to get the promotion? The one who's passionate or the one who's not? And this is what passion means, and this is what passion brings. That, and like people might be saying, it's like, well, I don't want to work 60, 70 hours a week. But if you're passionate about something, it doesn't really feel like you're working. And that's just that kind of this cool realm to be a part of. On the flip side, and I've been there, life is too short to spend 40 hours a week working on something you're not enthusiastic about. It's just like, it's crazy that there's so, and you get jealous because you see so many people doing things. It's like, wow, I love that. Why am I not doing that? I don't know, why not? And that's a question you need to ask yourself repeatedly. Like, when you get to university, if you're sitting through classes and being like, why am I not, like I remember when I was at Waterloo, like one of the things I was always like, I was jealous of my friends in their history classes. I'm like, man, that sounds like so much fun. Why am I not? It's a great question. I could have very easily been there. There was no reason not to be. But we tend to follow these paths that are set out for us as opposed to defining our own paths. And we'll talk more about that in the presentation. But remember, you are the author of your own book. No one else is. No one's writing it for you. And all these people who are going to point you in directions and tell you what to do, they're never going to put pen to paper for your book. They're not responsible for it. They're not anything. So, I mean, it's why enthusiasm and passion matters. And I think we see that in FIRST Robotics, because I don't think many of you would be here today on a Saturday morning if you weren't passionate about FIRST. And that's why it's so cool when you see these teams and how successful they are and how much energy they have. It's because it's passionate people trying to solve this problem. I've seen a lot of teams where FIRST Robotics has become a part of the curriculum at the school, which is cool. It's a thing. But you have teams where students are forced to be on the first team because they have to. It's part of the grade 12 physics class. It's like, I want to take grade 12 physics. And you see those teams and it's like, ooh, they don't have the same spirit and energy because they're missing the passion. And that's kind of what makes this program. Don't laugh. It's dramatic effect. Come on. All right, well, let's move on to the next slide if you're done laughing over there. So, next thing I want to talk about is ethical competition. And so, years ago, John Abley was the former chairman of the board for FIRST Robotics. And he actually has a business conferencing resort called the Kingbridge Center in just north of Toronto. And I was fortunate enough to be there for a conference that was, it was actually a really, really cool thing. It was partnering first with a company, Maple Leaf Foods, who was doing basically they were bringing all their executives to Kingbridge and they wanted to teach them about ethical competition. And so what FIRST Canada and 1114 at the time did was we developed a game using Vex robots to teach these adults and like senior executives about how to compete ethically and about gracious professionalism. And it was a really, really cool project and it was something amazing to be a part of. But John Abley gave a speech during this, and of all the words that have been told to me in 20 years of FIRST Robotics, these words stuck with me. There are two ways to compete in this world. You can drag your opponent down or you can rise above them. Which is better for society in the long run? And like this quote sticks with me, and it's like, it's kind of central to everything I do. In our world today, competition, some people see competition as a dirty word. I think all of you have heard about this, how, you know, it's like, oh, we don't want to call it a competition. We want to call it a challenge because competition implies there's a winner and there's a loser. And we don't want winners, you know, stomping on top of losers. And there's reasons for this. And there's a lot of discussion in education, especially early education, about the dangers of competition. However, and you know, you hear about you know, soccer leagues where they don't keep score anymore because you don't want people to feel bad about losing. And I understand all of that. However, I think competition is important. We can't solve big problems to a certain degree without competition. And competition is the lifeblood of innovation. However, there's different ways to compete. As John Abley said, there's two ways to compete. You can drag your opponent down or you can rise above. And rising above your competition is what I like to call ethical competition. And that is oh so important. When you think about the importance of competition, and I was talking about earlier, why do FIRST Robotics students succeed past FIRST Robotics? And a big part of it is not because they've built a winning robot, but they've learned how to win. And their endeavors to try and win. I tell this to people all the time. People ask me, it's like, what's the most important thing that kids on Team 1114 learn? And I always say, it isn't that they won so many times, it's that they learned how to win. And so in the process of competing, they now are better at competing for jobs. They're better going through the application process, the interview process, because they know to cover all the details. They know that cutting corners isn't the way that you're going to succeed and be the best. But in all of this, it's competing the right way, and it's rising above your opponent. So we all fall into this trap, and because like everyday life is a competition. You're in school right now, and I think you guys see this a lot of the time. And so there'll be that one kid, and she'll have the highest marks in the grade, and you know, she might not be the most popular kid, and people will always be like, ugh, she only has high grades because she doesn't go out ever. She's always studying. Or, yeah, she only has high grades, but like, does she do anything else? I mean, how do you know? And why is that relevant in any way whatsoever? That's a way of rationalizing why you're not doing as well as she is. But how is that going to help you? And how is it relevant in any way? The proper way to look at it is, yeah, I don't know why she gets marks that are so good. Let me find out. Let me talk to her. What is she doing right that I'm not doing? And that's competing the right way, where it's, yeah, I want to do better than her, but I have to figure out what she's doing and to improve myself. I mean, it's a common quote, but like, losers don't make excuses. Sorry, winners don't make excuses. That makes a lot more sense. Losers make excuses all the time. I'm going to make an excuse for flubbing that in just a minute. But like, when you look at it, and like, it's not just in that realm. It'll be like, you know, like, say you got this dude at school, you know, he's on the football team, like, you know, he's the most popular guy. It's like, oh, he's only popular because he plays football. I bet he's a moron. Maybe he's not. How do you know? And like, why is that the instinct? But that's always the instinct, is to like, you know, I'm going to tell, this is being webcast. I don't want to tell this story necessarily, but I guess like, you know, at one point I remember like I was going through something, and then, no, I'm not going to tell the story. I can't do it. I can't do it. Come find me afterwards. I'll tell the story. It's actually a good one. But I mean, there's this instinct to just kind of look for reasons and to blame. And we see it all the time in FIRST and in FRC. And let's just lay it out here. You see the best team at an event. Oh, the mentors probably built their robot. There's no way those kids built that robot. There's no way. That is the worst way of looking at things. Because even if it's true, how does that help you? Does it make you feel better at night? Does it, you know? Because like, it's not actually helping. How about you go talk to that team and find out what they're doing and find out why they're able to be so successful. And that's how you get better. This used to be a thing in Ontario, and it still is to a certain degree. But there was a phase in Ontario, a good 5-6 years, where every event in the province was won by the same two teams for like from 2006 to 2012, just 2013, over and over. See, I'm banging on the thing again, over and over again. But there were some teams were just like, cheaters. GM builds their robot, or the kids don't know anything. First of all, that was so insulting to the students on the team, just so insulting. But it wasn't helping anyone. But then there were some teams who decided, hey, I want to learn from these teams. I'm going to talk to them. And, you know, so like you had the 1114s and 2056s, but then like a team like 1241 was constantly asking questions, wanting to learn. And a couple years later, they were one of the best teams in the world. And more teams in Ontario have followed that cycle of competing ethically and trying to rise above their opponents, so they're learning from their opponents and then trying to adapt. And that's why Ontario has become the region that it's become in FIRST Robotics. For years, things were stagnant while people were getting their butts kicked, and they were just kind of complaining and whining. But once people decided to compete the right way and try and rise above, we had this vibrant culture where you never know who's going to win at any event in Ontario because there's so many good teams. I can tell you right now what's going to happen in 2019. There's going to be like 3 or 4 Ontario teams on Einstein, but I have no idea who. But it's going to be some of them because there's just this mass of great teams up the top, and you just don't know. But that's because of this community of helping each other, and that's why FIRST is so different. I know in business settings, people have often commented, they're like, you don't have that killer instinct. And I'm like, first of all, I have that killer instinct. Secondly, I'm just not killing for the sake of killing. And I think it's really important that for the benefit of our society, that these values that you learn in FIRST about gracious professionalism and treating your opponent the right way, they really do matter. Because when you get out into the professional world, there's so many people who don't have that respect. And they are constantly nipping at people. It is the worst thing to be in a workplace where you're being cut off by your coworkers because they think that their success is dependent on your failure. But I found that people who participate in FIRST don't see things that way. And that's just the coolest cultural lesson. And I don't even think Dean and Woody could have dreamed of the impact of their programs that they're having right now. But I just think it's so important that we compete the right way. And I mean, I think Michelle Obama said it best: when they go low, we go high. So when someone's cutting at your knees, just forget about them. I mean, there's no better revenge than not caring. So, when people are coming after you, and if you are that top student in the school and people are just making fun of you, saying, oh, you probably don't have any friends, that's why your grades are good, who cares? Just ignore them. Ryan, what are you winking at? I saw that. You're turning red as your sweatshirt right now. But it's really important that you take these lessons forward and you always go high. Don't let the negative attitudes plague you. And why are we here today? It's, if for anything, to learn from each other. And that's super important. So if you're wondering, it's like, yeah, why isn't my team as successful as it should be? Why aren't we doing better? Ask for help. The resources are out there. And the people that you think are your competitors, I mean, they are, but they're also more than willing to help you, and they're more than willing to teach you. And for them, teaching that you helps them because they're going to learn something along the way. It's this cool sort of relationship, and that's kind of the power of FIRST Robotics. And so, yeah, this is all good stuff. So let's hit the next slide. We're just going to talk about a bunch of different things. Gentlemen, we are going to relentlessly chase perfection, knowing full well we will not catch it, because nothing is perfect. But we are going to relentlessly chase it, because in the process, we will catch excellence. I am not remotely interested in just being good. That's from Vince Lombardi, the famed NFL coach of the Green Bay Packers. So perfectionism, it's a thing, and it's dangerous because it's good, and it's dangerous because it can be bad. But I think it's really important to remember that nothing is perfect. But perfection is a valid goal. But it doesn't matter if you get to this goal, because along the way, you're going to learn so much. It's what we were talking about to start this whole presentation. In the process of trying to win, you learn all these valuable skills. And that's why striving for perfection is so important. And when we look at it with our robots, you don't catch excellence by doing things once. And I think there's a tendency of a lot of teams, you build your robot, you slap it together, and then it's like, hey, it's done. Whoo-wee, it's done. And then you want to walk away from it. And that's fine, but you have to understand the top teams if you ask them, hey, is your robot done yet? No. When's it going to be done? The day after championship. That will almost always be the answer. And why is that? Because you have to keep working and you have to keep iterating. And it's important in the course of the competition, but there's no better way to learn than to try and keep improving and try and catch perfection and try and reach this sort of goal. In all my years in FIRST, I don't think I've seen a perfect robot. I've seen close. 469 in 2010 was probably the closest to a perfect robot that I've ever seen. But I've been a part of great robots. I've seen great robots, and the thing that ties them all together is like this effort to want to be better. And it's crazy when you see teams out there who will go out and they'll win their first district event or they'll win a regional event, and you would think, well, their robot is set for the season. But they'll go back to their school and they'll work on a new intake and they'll work on something new because they know that the level that they're at right now might be good enough to win now, but they're not sure that it's going to be good enough to win later on, and they just want to keep on improving. And so it's about not resting on your laurels and just kind of going for it all the way. But I have to warn you with this one, because perfectionism is also a trap. And there's a lot of danger in that, especially in your school lives, because I want to say it's the rule of 80-20, but I want to even kind of break those numbers down. But it's talking about diminishing returns, that once you reach a certain point of success, like your grades, it is a lot easier to go from a 70 to an 80 than it is from an 80 to a 90. And it's a lot easier to go from a 90 to a 95 than it is to go from a 95 to a 96. And when you're playing in the margins, you got to worry about like how much time you're expending to this, because there's like, it's diminishing returns. And it's dangerous because I remember like, I don't want to say this without sounding boastful, but like once you get to that point, when you're in school and you're getting 100% on things, it kind of sucks, because it's like you make one mistake and it's ruined, and you just feel like everything's ruined. Like I just remember at a Lynn Alge course at Waterloo, like I got my exam back and it was like 49 out of 50, and I was just like losing my mind, because it was just like, it's like you have this goal, and perfectionism can be a major, major trap. Also, perfectionism is often used as the great excuse for procrastination, because there's like something more important you should be working on, but why not spend like an extra like 5 hours on this presentation just fine tuning when you could be studying for an exam where you haven't cracked the books yet. So perfectionism can be a trap, but in the context of FIRST Robotics, continue iterating, and we'll talk about where you can pull away from the trap of perfectionism on the next slide. All right, so now we're into the nitty gritty. Forget about like the fancy quotes and all that. We're into nitty gritty robot stuff right now. This is a slide from my effective first strategy slide presentation. Don't worry about the exact details of it, but it's what I like to call the golden rules. And I think a lot of teams have kind of adapted these golden rules in FIRST. And golden rule number one basically is build within your team's limits, but you have to define what those limits are. Golden rule number two is a really important one. And the basic gist of it is, if you have 30 units of robot functionality, it's better to do 3 things at 10 out of 10 instead of 5 at 6 out of 10. And I bring this up right now not to talk about your robots, but I want to talk about your lives, because we've got grade 10s, 11s, 12s in this room, and a lot of people are going through the process of applying to university or setting up their applications as they go towards university. And this rule applies to your extracurriculars, because there is a tendency to want to dive bomb your resume and just go with like every extracurricular and do every single thing. But you can't. You cannot do everything. It's impossible. And if you try and do everything, you're just going to do a bunch of things and be mediocre at them. And that's not what schools want to see. And now, I'm going to tell you the dirty little secret that a lot of people don't like to talk about, and universities' admissions officers will never admit this to you, especially in this province, but your extracurriculars, they matter a little bit, but not really. Almost all universities are they're doing cutoffs based on your grades, and that's what they're making their decisions based on. Like they say, oh, if you put FIRST on your resume, it's a huge benefit. It is, but like usually they'll give you like a tick, like 1 extra % on your average at most. Your grades really, really matter. That's what your focus should be. If we're thinking about robots, your grades are your drivetrain. If you don't have the grades, you're not getting in. If your drivetrain doesn't work, you're not getting picked. You're sitting there in the corner. You're just go away. You can't even play defense. You can't do anything for us. Your grades really, really matter. And this tendency to try and do like 8 extracurriculars, and it's like, oh, if my grades drop a little bit, it's okay, I'm going to be well-rounded. Yes, you're going to be well-rounded, and that's great for the rest of your life. I want people to be well-rounded, trust me. I do not want to see more people who just focus on school and nothing else. However, your grades really, really do matter. And maybe it's important to kind of just pick 1 or 2 extracurriculars as opposed to trying to hit 8 different things. And it's cool to be able to say, oh, I was in this club, I was in that club, or whatever. Like, I think with this audience, if you're here on a Saturday morning, most of you are pretty hardcore into FIRST. I think most of you probably know people on your teams who are on the robotics team and then put on their resume. It's like, oh, I was on the FIRST robotics team, except they came in for like, what, 1 meeting, 2 meetings? You don't ever want to be that person in any club, because the club that you are most passionate about FIRST, you hate seeing people do that. But I bet you people on the badminton team hate it when people do that too. So don't be that person. And it's important to remember it's better to focus on a few things and do them and be excellent at them. This goes back to our whole talk about passion. The people who are going to devote their time and dive into a topic are the ones who are going to be successful at it. So when picking what to do, with robots, we do a priority list based on game analysis. But when you're in high school, how about you just pick the couple extracurriculars that you're super passionate about? Do those ones. And there's no like scale out there. Like a lot of people are like, oh, well, universities care a lot more about this than that. They don't. It's just like, because like you hear these crazy debates. People are like, oh, DECA is so much more important than FIRST, or model parliament is so much more important. It's like, if you really like model parliament, then do model parliament. If you really like FIRST, then do FIRST. Like it doesn't, don't have this debate. It's about doing what you're passionate about. And so, I just want to say like, this applies everywhere, that quality over quantity. And it really, really applies to the robots. And I'll say this over and over again, because why not talk about robots since we're here? I'm tired of seeing these teams that try and do everything and just can't do anything. And it just happens over and over. And every year there's a team who just focuses on a couple small parts of the game and just dominates. And it's so refreshing when that happens. I just think of the 2017 game of all the teams who were trying to shoot. And it's just like, it's like all these teams are trying to, and then just a couple teams out there, we're just going to do gears. We're just going to do gears. And like that was the recipe for success because they were really, really good at it. And it applies so often. And, I just think about all the teams, especially the rookie teams. If we got rookies in this room, the rookies who just do the fewest amount of things and focus on that do super, super well. Like, what did I say about FIRST robots? I've never seen a perfect FIRST robot, but it goes back to the top one, where build within your team's limits. You got to figure out what is reasonable and set a goal for that. Let's hit the next slide. Limits, like fears, are often just an illusion. So I bring this one up because it's from Michael Jordan in his speech when he got into the Basketball Hall of Fame. And when Michael Jordan was a high school student, he actually didn't make the basketball team. It's a famous story, and it's true. He did not make the varsity basketball team. And the coach basically said, yeah, you're never going to cut it at this. He didn't buy it. And in your lives, you're going to have people setting limits for you constantly. And it's kind of crazy, especially in high school. And it's like it applies academically, it applies so I mean, it's like the old thing about, I'm just going to date myself with The Breakfast Club, with the movie, but it's kind of like where people expect you to be a certain person in high school. And like after 4 years of being around the same people and sometimes longer, you're typecast into a role and you just kind of feel that this is who I am now. But that's not who you have to be. And it's why so many students love going away to university, because it's like a reset button. It's like, oh wait, I don't have to be the person I was because of where I was in high school. I can be who I want to be. And I think this is really important, like to define your own limits and just to not believe the restraints out there. I know a few years ago there was a first student, his name's Alex Rodriguez, and he started team 4334 out in Calgary. And he was just a super bright kid. And there was no first in Calgary when he started this team. But, people was like, oh, you can't. He had an FTC team that actually won FTC Worlds, but he wanted to do FRC. And so him and his parents and his friends got together a team. And again, there were no teams in Calgary. And so, but they got this team started. And then they flew all the way to Toronto for an event because that was the only event they could go to, like, because that was, it. And they qualified for Worlds. And everyone's told them, it's like, okay, well, congratulations for getting to Worlds. But then they got to Worlds and they won their division. And they went to Einstein. And again, they built a super simple robot. They didn't try and they only did one thing. They could just kind of shuttle balls. The robot was like this big, literally. Anyways, I'm kind of just getting off the train of thought here. But anyways, Alex went on to the University of Waterloo and then became a mentor on Team 1114. And while he was at Waterloo, he was playing around with a side project, which was just to, he was playing around with LiDARs to try and make things move autonomously. And this was just kind of his side sort of thing. And he was talking about it all the time. And I remember a conversation he had with another mentor, and they're like, why are you even doing that? It's like you can't invent the first autonomous car. Like GM or someone is going to do that. You know, it's like, oh, I'm going to do my thing. And eventually, he installed like a LiDAR and some technology on a golf cart. And that became the first ever autonomous vehicle to drive on a Canadian road legally. And so now Alex is 23 and has a company in California called Embark Technologies worth $47 million. People told him, oh, you can't do this. This is impossible. 23, only a handful of years older than all of you, and running one of the, he was just named to the Forbes 30 under 30. He was the first student who started like a lot of you, just wanted to have a team at his school, and it just kept doing what he was passionate about and kept making connections and kept learning and kept educating. 23 years old, $47 million company. Guess what? It's only going to get bigger. Because he started off by trying to do autonomous golf carts, because that's what he first did. And just because he's like, oh yeah, let's just do vehicles that can drive around university campuses, because that's what he thought he could do. But then he's like, well, you know, there's a lot of trucks in North America. And there's a lot of truck drivers. And man, imagine if we could do autonomous big rigs. That's what his business is doing. They're trying to autonomize big rigs. And Embark right now is positioned ahead of companies like General Motors in terms of this autonomous race. 23 years old. But I bet you 5 years ago, everyone in his life would have told him, that's crazy, that's impossible. So limits, like fears, are often just an illusion. Notice how, and Michael's not a dumb man. He is a very smart man. He said the word often in there. Because sometimes limits are real. But the point of this is it's important for you to discover your own limits and figure out where they are. And don't just buy into what other people are telling you. In general, don't believe everything people tell you. When you walk away from this presentation, fact check me. I could just be full of it. Who's Alex Rodriguez? He's not even a real person. You know, I could be making that up. It's so important to think critically and analyze at all points. If you want to be effective problem solvers and you want to be like, I don't want to get like political here, but I think we can see that a lot of the problems in the world right now are because a lot of people have just been believing what's been served up to them and not looking a little bit deeper. And it is so important that you have awareness and or thinking critically and realizing, does that actually make sense? Do those numbers add up? And you know, we should be a fact-based society, making decisions rationally based on the criteria put forth to us, not just believing what is being told. Remember, like in terms of limits, all the greatest inventions came in the face of previous limits. It wouldn't have been a great invention if people didn't believe it was impossible. So always kind of be thinking about that, and you are your own person. You don't have to be the person everyone wants you to be. I think that's kind of all I wanted to talk about here today, but just, you know, to sum it up, discover your passions and follow them. I think I did an injustice to this presentation where I just kept talking about following your passions. Discovering what you're passionate about is the first step to following your passions, and that is hard. That is not easy. But part of that is try different things, try things out, just kind of see where it's at, feel things out. A lot of students here who are graduating, you're going to go into university and you're going to want to come back and mentor your FRC teams, and like that's a great goal. Thank you for wanting to do that. We'll appreciate that. But like, don't feel obligated to do that, because university is really where you find yourself. And if you've done FIRST for 4 years in high school, you know you love FIRST. And guess what? FIRST is still going to be here when you're done. Try some other things out. Figure out what else you're passionate about. Who knows? Always compete your hardest. Never shortchange yourself or your team, but do it ethically. Learn from your opponents and help them rise up and rise above them. Chase perfection, catch excellence along the way. Define your own limits. Don't let anyone put you in a box. And go out into the world and do amazing things. You got this. Thank you, everyone.